Welcome! We are streaming from HobbyJapan, Tokyo. I'm Kabukin. I'm here with Eureka.
Hi.
And we have the top players from Japan. The world champion, Kurosawa, and Kakka. So, apologies.
Yeah, first things first. We gotta apologize for the time delay. We got mixed up from daylight savings time, so there was a 1 hour delay on our end. We meant to do it at this time, and we just wrote the wrong time on the thumbnail. So sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
But anyways, today we are going to talk about the Opus 16 Emissaries of Light metagame, and we have some decks from viewers. We're going to go over those. We're going to do some deck doctoring, and at the end we've got some spoilers for you guys.
Yes.
So, 3 parts to today's show, and let's get started.
Okay. So, are we going to talk about the new rules?
Yes.
So there's a slight change.
Yes. So
yeah.
we're gonna talk about the update to the ban list.
Ban list, yeah.
And so there's 2 parts to the bans. First, in standard and in L6, Moshiri was banned, and in L6 and L3, Amber was banned. And we're gonna talk about the Emissaries of Light metagame after Moshiri's ban for the most part. Up until now, it's been a little bit different, but we know that a lot of you guys overseas will be playing with events in this environment with the Moshiri ban in effect. So we're going to go ahead and talk about what we think about how the meta has been up until now and how we think it might change going forward. So I'm going to be doing some interpretation as well as adding my own thoughts onto what everybody says today. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. So, what are we going to talk about? So, should we ask the top players what they think about the ban?
ざっくり言って、その今までの環境ってどういった中心で動いている環境だったのかとか、それについて何か考えがあれば。
じゃあマシュリーが禁止になる前の環境はやっぱりマシュリーデッキ水炭であったり火炭、火水であったりと、あとビスマルクデッキですね、風炭とか空賊で、あと夜会、この3組みたいな感じの環境がベースにありました。
Okay, so Kurosawa says that basically up until this point for the Opus 16 Emissaries of Light in metagame, it was mostly comprised of like 3 major parts, and I'm totally inclined to agree. It was mostly Moshiri decks, so there was Mono Water, Mono Fire, and Fire Water Braska. The second part would be Bismarck decks. This would be like, Sky Pirates, Mono Wind, Ice Wind, decks like this. And the third part would be Soiree decks. So that is a little bit wider because it's hard to pin it down into a certain set of elements, but in general, is the Soiree lists that played a good amount of EX burst, and those would be the 3 big parts of the environment up until this point. So, how do we think that will change with Moshiri gone?
さっきの3つのデッキの中でマシュリーに、強かったのが夜会デッキなんですけど、そのマシュリーデッキがいなくなることで、ちょっと夜会デッキのポジションが、相対的には悪くなって、ビスマルクを使ったデッキが一番トップメタの位置に来るのかなという印象を持っています。
So Kurosawa says that basically, without Moshiri decks, Soiree is going to lose, should lose some of its potency as a deck that was primarily based around being good against Moshiri. As Moshiri has been banned and all the Moshiri decks, as a result, are dropping off, we expect to see a bit of a downtrend in the potency of Soiree decks, and as a result, probably Bismarck decks sharing the top share of the meta. At least that's how we would expect it to play out in our meta.
とあとはなんかどんなデッキが新しいデッキがどんなのが出てくるかっていうのがよかったら。
あ、そうだね。新しいデッキについて、マシリは禁止用についてどんなデッキが出てくるかっていう話だと、なんだろう、やっぱその非効率とかそのアグロ、やっぱそのバーストに今までよかったアグロとかも出てくるし、あと自分が好きな侍とか結構立ち位置が良くなるかなと思う。
Yeah, so in terms of new or potentially older decks that could come back as a result of this, that we hadn't seen much of in the metagame up until now, that would kind of take the place of Mashri decks in the metagame as kind of more aggressive strategies or strategies that were pushed out by Mashri would be decks like Fire Ice, which was a deck that we didn't see a whole lot of here, especially domestically in Japan. But we think does have some potential now that Mashri is off of the radar. Another one would be Kakka's favorite Samurai deck, and that's a deck that was kind of pushed out of the meta because of Mashri. There you go, there it is. Yeah, there's a deck that was kind of pushed out of the meta because of the the effect that Mashri had on the meta rather than as the one card in general. But that could be something that's more well-suited to a metagame that's returning to a more mid-range pace that has more wind in it and things like that.
あと侍に関係するところでもあるんですけど、マシュリーやっぱりバウンスの効果が強かったので、それがなくなることでアタック時に誘発するオートアビリティを持ったフォワード、例えば何ですか、スコールとかですね、とかがまた強化されるのかなという感じもありますね。
So Kurosawa brings up a great point about Mashri's primary limiting factor on the meta was potentially her bounce ability, and because of the bounce ability being more expensive, being tied to summons, and not being tied to Mashri herself anymore, it seems more likely that cards like Squall that are able to produce value over time by staying on the board, by attacking, and things like that are going to be potentially more potent. And that kind of ties into the potential strength that we see for Samurais, with Tenzin being a kind of a similar card, although not by attacking, and but by staying on the field for a long amount of time. Is there anything that you would be excited to play for an upcoming event if we were playing into this span list? なんかもしこの禁止改定で16段環境が、適用されてたらなんか使ってみたいデッキってなんか侍か
な。私はあんまりビスマルクデッキ使ってこなかったんで、もうちょっと使う機会が増えてたかなという感じが。
ビスマルクじゃ何が気になるのデッキで？
やっぱり空賊かな。そうです。
いいデッキだね。Yeah, so just go ahead and ask them about what potential decks that they might be interested if they are playing in an upcoming tournament with the ban list in effect, but still in the Opus 16 environment, which is not something that's happening domestically. But Kakka said that he would be excited to use Samurais, and Kurosawa said that he hasn't used a whole lot of Bismarck decks up until this point. And he'd be excited to probably play a Bismarck deck, potentially Sky Pirates. So I agreed with him. I think that deck's great.
ポロリディアとかは使えなくなるっていう話でしたね。
そうリディアがちょっとだいぶ使いづらい、召喚獣が減って使いづらいかなっていう話で、パロムとポロム自体はその召喚獣に依存しないからちょっと残りそうかなっていう感じ。
In terms of some other Mashri decks besides, the Firewater Braska deck, the Mono Water, and the Fire deck, there was Rydia, which was a deck that Kurosawa is pretty well known for piloting to great success at Masters Tokyo and events like that, as well as the Firewater Palamporum decks, potentially without Braska, and or Rydia Palamporum altogether, which was another deck that showed up at Masters Final. These decks, they do definitely lose out on some of their power from Mashri being banned. However, Rydia is a lot more affected by this because she tended to force you to play a lot of summons in order to guarantee that you're going to get value off of her over time, especially summons like Moogle and Poo-Poo, which were these cantrips that Rydia essentially lets you cycle for free that let you put more summons into the break zone to use Mashri's effect more reliably. So in terms of those decks that were focused on Rydia are probably hurt a lot more by this ban list than decks like Palamporum, which don't inherently have anything to do with summons. So it does seem likely that there could be potentially good Palamporum deck to come out of this on the other side. What that looks like is going to be very different from the Palamporum decks that we saw up until this point.
召喚時に関する影響でいうと、あとはそのこれまでマシュリーがブレイクゾーンの召喚時をリソースとして使っていたので、その他のカードですね、まあ、例えばクルルとか、あとはそもそも召喚時を除外してしまう、誰だメイヤーとかですね、にもまたチャンスが出てくるのかなと思います。
Yeah, so just in terms of decks that play a lot of summons in general, because of the existence of Mashri, it was very hard to justify the use of cards that removed summons from your break zone as a mechanic. And because of that, because Mashri could turn them into bounces or turn them into draws, so it was just hard to play those in a deck. As a result, we might expect to see some of a small comeback of cards like Krill, which removes and reuses summons in your break zone and benefits from having more from being able to generate more value with her action ability over time, as well as cards like Maya, which is from this set, but it hasn't really come through to shine in the current environment just because it removes from play the summon, and so you can't reuse it with Mashri and get extra resources out of it. So those could be potential avenues to play summon decks going forward that are a little different from what we've seen with Mashri up until this point.
Is that about it?
I want to talk about Avalanche just a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest decks that is a winner from the Mashri ban is Avalanche. So Avalanche had a lot of trouble against Mashri decks just because bouncing Barret over and over again was kind of a problem for maintaining the momentum that the deck had. It's not necessarily that Avalanche couldn't beat anything in the meta. It's obviously very good against wind decks in particular, against slower decks that have targets for wedge to break. It can generate a lot of advantage and had a lot of closing power, but just because Mashri caused you to lose so much momentum, it didn't really have the ability to push through in the meta. Like, playing against, in a Swiss tournament, if you played against Mashri twice, that was enough to potentially cost you your top 8. And that made it pretty difficult to convert the deck into any wins, despite it being a pretty powerful deck against a good portion of what's happening in the meta. And I think with Mashri gone, Barret is a lot more likely to stick, especially on the turn that you play him, which is when it's most important because that's when you're going to be getting multiple avalanches onto the board, or turn 1 as well. And because of that, I think Avalanche is actually a pretty huge winner from this. The other part to that is that the deck that was really good against Mashri decks, which is Soiree, played a lot of EX bursts, and Avalanche is a deck that has to attack. And because it has to attack, it's going to run into those EX bursts. So, yeah, it just wasn't really in the right place to really see its full potential. And I think after the ban list, there's a lot more likelihood that we can see good Avalanche decks on the other side. というところですかね。Okay, so if there's any questions or you have anything that you want us to talk about before we end the segment, go ahead and let us know in the chat. If not, we'll probably get going.
And
so,
the ban list is on the chat.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And yeah, somebody was asking about the ban list in the chat, so we've got a link to it right there for you. Does anybody else have anything they want us to touch on? I'll give it a minute or so. Maybe that's a long time. Very small ban list on this call.
Okay. So should we move on to E?
Yeah, let's move on then. So,
We have a few decks to review.
Okay, so we're gonna do the deck doctor segment then. So let's go ahead and move to the first deck that we have to share with you guys today. First of all, thank you for all of the submissions. We couldn't have this segment or the show without all of you guys who are interested in having us look at your stuff. So thank you for all of your cooperation. Thank you for submitting your decks. We only have time to talk about maybe 2 or 3 today. So we're going to do our best to cover what we can and give our feedback on each of them. But yeah, we'll probably only get to about 3. So thank you for everybody who submitted. And let's go ahead and see
The first deck.
Yeah, the first deck, the lucky winner.
Deck name, Luso Shenanigans.
Shenanigans. Yeah, so this is a Luso deck submitted by one Edward Schultz. Thank you very much, Edward Schultz. And this is a Luso deck, which Luso is a card. It's kind of difficult to use, I guess is the right to say. There's a lot of upfront power on the card, but it's a little unwieldy. It's hard to make full power of the card. So this is a deck that attempts to do that as best as possible. So what do we think about the deck? What are some of the cards that we might want to add to it? Let's start with cards that we want to add.
Adding.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. 追加したいカード。
まずはデッキのコンセプトになっているルッソを何としても、初手に引き込みたいというのがあるので、ミースがもう1枚入れてもいいっていうのがありますね。で、そうするとルッソが6枚相当入っていることになって大体8割ぐらい多分マリガン込みで引けるようになるので、もうちょっと安定感が増しますと。で、もちろんなんていうかな、マーシュとかも入ってるんですけども、これの3枚は絶対入れた方がいいかなと思いました。
Yeah, so first of all, just as the core concept of the deck is so revolving around Luso, we might consider adding a third Meath, just because if you assume that your Meath will always have a 6-drop to search for the Luso, then that should increase your chances of being able to play the Luso turn 1 to about an 80% of the time. Obviously, you will draw the Meath and not have a 6 to search for Luso some of the time, but that's a pretty minor miscalculation, and it could be made up for in other aspects by adding potentially different 6-drops into the future.
あとはルッソからめくれた時にバリューを取れるカードが多分いろいろあると思うんで、そのあたりも足していったらいいかなというところですね。
バックアップ的な。
そうですね。
はい。
どんなのがありますかね。
2コストバックアップじゃなくて今4コストバックアップ、その場合的にサーチする、実質的にドローがついてるカード、その引いたんですとモンブランとかそのザクヘみたいな手的に効果があるカードを追加した、重くて効果があるカードを追加した方がいいかなと思います。
Yeah, so one of the biggest rewards that you can get for Luso is getting cards back immediately when his ability resolves. So you might consider adding some backups that can buy some of the value back that have a draw or a +1 attached to them when you flip them with Luso. So some of these cards that Kakka suggested are cards like Mont Blanc. That can search for the forward marsh on EX burst or when it enters play as a 4 CP backup, or cards like Dominion Legionary, which is a relatively older 4 CP backup searcher that searches for another copy of card name Dominion Legionary. This would be a potentially good way to not only ensure that you have a good backup economy, but also get a lot of value off of the turn 1 Luso when you do flip it. It'll make sure that you can get to your second backup pretty quickly. Another card that can do this that I had thought of was Kojin, which is the Opus 14 backup, sorry, not Opus 14, the Category 14 backup that flips 2 cards off the top of the deck. This one is not as good of card selection as Dominion Legionary or Mont Blanc, but is still a really nice source of card advantage when it comes in off of Luso, and during the late game it can pop to help you help find a little bit of extra finishing power.
後人族とか種族兵とかは一般兵でもあるので、その まあ、ルッソからめくった時に被るのが一番悲しいんですけど、そういうのもないのもいいですね。
Yeah, another minor note there is that both Kojin and Dominion Legionnaire are standard units. So one of the biggest downfalls of Luso is when you flip over a card that you already have. But with Kojin and Dominion Legionnaire, you can't, because they're standard units, that's never going to happen. So when you flip them, you're always going to have some stable value.
フォワードを見ていくと、こう出した時にやっぱ手札が増えるカードを増やしたいかなというのがあるので、ゼノスがちょっと注目のカードかなというふうに思ってます。このカードを使おうと思うと、14のフォワードを、15とか、できれば18枚とか入れないとなかなかこうアビリティが安定してこないんですけども、そういう観点でなんか追加できるカードがあるといいかなというふうに思いました。
Yeah, so one of the big upsides of using Luso is getting cards that, like we said with the backups, get some value back when they hit the field. And one of the cards that's best at doing this in this deck is Xenos. So Xenos is a Category 14 forward that wants you to play a lot of other Category 14 forwards. So the big part of this one is that we kind of feel that there's maybe not enough Category 14 forwards to really guarantee that you're going to get your value back when Xenos does hit the field off of Luso's ability, or just in general. And so we might consider adding Category 14 forwards to the deck. Kurosawa recommends between at least 15 to 18 is probably 18. Where you want to be to hit those magic numbers on getting 1 to 2 cards off of Xenos every time he hits the field. That's just part of the Reveal 5 math.
特に入れたい14のフォワードって何かあったりしますか？
やっぱアルフィナリゼですね。アルフィナリゼ自体がそもそも両方とも揃えばルスをサーチできたりするんで、サーチカードの水増しにもなったりするんで、相性はいいかなと思います。
So one of the cards that we might consider adding for the Category 14 package as part of Xenos would be Alphanod and Alice. These are Category 14 forwards that are a little lighter than some of the other Luso targets that we have in the deck, but both of them do get you 1 card back when they hit the field, and they work with Xenos. And Alphanod works with Luso not only to obviously search for any card in your deck, but when you don't have the Luso, you can go find the Luso if you open Alize and are able to resolve Alphanod off of it.
14軸以外に何か入れたいカードとか調整したいバックとか何かあれば。
減らすカードについても話します
か。減らすカードも、はい。
減らすカードとしてやっぱ火力出すバックアップ、バックアップ今まで結構足しっていう話さっき出たんで、ですけど、バックアップだから少しちょっと追加するんだったら減らさなきゃいけないんですけど、ブレイズとかちょっと出た時5000点ってあるんですけど、5000点が今生きる環境じゃないんで、ちょっとそういったカードを差し替えた方がいいかなと思います。ブレイズ一緒ですね。
So Kakka's recommendations for backups to potentially cut in this position would be Blaze. And the reasoning behind that is that you need to have a certain amount of backups in the deck for it to function that are relatively easy to play to the field. And Blaze is kind of one of the more expensive backups in the game. And while it is a useful EX burst, the action ability is good. The enter the field ability to deal 5,000 to 2 forwards right now is not particularly useful. It doesn't hit a whole lot of cards in the meta at the moment. And while it could be a potential tech card that you can consider and or play more of in the future, it might be best to cut it for the time being.
あとは氷がタッチされてラスウェルが入ってるんですけど、14のフォワードでも、バリューを取ることができるので、無理に氷をタッチする必要はないかなということで、これも抜いてもいいんじゃないかなというふうに思います。
Yeah, so another card we might consider cutting from the list would be Lastwell, just because if you build for the 14 strategy, we feel like you should be able to get enough value from the Luso off of the 14 off of the 14 synergy and the 14 cards that are buying you back value, enough that Lastwell might potentially just be worth the cut. It is a pretty difficult card to play to the field, considering that the only way to actually get it there is to discard another copy of itself or have the class second Moogle backup, or flip it off of Luso. So that it might just be a little bit too inconsistent, and there's no need to try so hard to get the value off of the Luso, we feel.
あとはミースを増やすのと関連してロココストの、フォワードとかです。だから、レインとかを入れてもいいかなと思います。ちょっとそこの枚数を増やすことを考慮していいと思います。
Kurosawa brings up a great point that while we were talking about adding the third Meath to get better access to Luso, and so because of that we might want to add more 6 drops so that the Meath is actually active on turn 1 to search for the Luso, and in that regard we might consider playing some copies of Rain, just because it is relatively expensive on the cost side, but when you have your backups down it's not actually a particularly expensive card, and it's just been a pretty great card for Mono Fire all around since its release. So in terms of cards that I might personally be tempted to drop, I think Zidane, the Opus 11 Hero Zidane, costs 2 with haste. While it is good at enabling Amaro and just having some extra haste in the deck, it doesn't have any particular synergies with any of the cards in this deck. And it might be better suited at being an extra value card. Maybe this would be some of the slots that you'd use for Alice and Alphanod at some point.
あと何かあれば。
あとはまあちょっと全般的な話というか、ほぼまとめなんですけど、やっぱりルッソーでこう結構最初の方のターンに出したいカードなので、まあ、除去とか相手の盤面ボードステートに依存するカードよりも、こうサーチとかドローとかですね、そういう自分のリソースだけで完結するカードの方が、まあ、相性がいいというかゲームプランが作りやすいのかなという、まあ、ところで多分こういう、案を多分ご提案してる感じなのかなと思います。はい、
比叡全体やっぱ火力出すカード多いんだけど、それって相手の盤面がいないと特になんか何もないからっていう。
Yeah, so more of a big picture part of the deck is for Kurosawa and Kakka that they've brought up here is that one of the major strengths of Mono Fire is that it has a lot of cards that are good at removing the opponent's board, but a card like Luso is all about taking proactive steps in putting value and aggression on the board, and because of that it might be better to choose some of the particular cards here, you know, like the Legend Cloud, Zidane, and cards like this, and removing some of them for cards that are better at just creating your own, like doing whatever you want to do with the game state. So kind of assisting Luso rather than trying to put down the opponent might be a better approach. So cards that might you might consider swapping out for something else would be cards like Cayenne or Ranjit or Emperor Zan, which are not particularly good at generating advantage, but are well, they are good cards to head off of Luso. They're not particularly good at generating advantage. I think that mostly wraps things up for this deck. Should we go to the next one?
Okay.
Okay.
Deck name Monsters.
わかりやすい。Yeah, so this is a Earth Wind, although you can tell because of the realm, deck that was submitted to us by one Jeffrey Marshall. Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey Marshall. So the basic concept for this deck is, well, it's a deck that any long-standing FF player has probably encountered once or twice, but maybe not in the last few opuses. It's kind of an older strategy by playing a lot of forward monsters to the field and then using Veilfor or Shantoto and cards like that to remove just your opponent's forwards and then turning your monsters into forwards and attacking your opponent for the win.
じゃあ、とりあえずいじりたい軸とか追加したいカードのあれば。
そうまずはこのデッキの勝ち筋はやっぱりどうしてもモンスターになるフォワードで殴っていくというところなので、その、枚数が大事になってきますと。であとはですね、 そのボードワイプを打った時に、フォワードになってないモンスターの方が、よりいいというところになってきます。なので、ティポンは除去として優秀なのでいいんですが、ザグナル君は、別のやつに変えた方がいいかなというところがあって、でコボルト小型の3枚目であったり、あとはバンガー、アトモスの3枚目とかですね、他のモンスターに変えることをまず考えていいかなと思います。
Yeah, so one of the first things that we noticed with this deck list is that, the way that these kinds of decks win are basically always by removing your opponent's forward, with a Veil 4 or Shantoto, and then attacking with your monsters. And for a deck that's aiming to do that, we kind of felt that the number of monsters that become forwards is a little low. And some of the ones that are here, like Zagnal, for example, are... They're forwards when you play the Veil 4 or the Shantoto, which is potentially problematic in that they won't be able to stick around to attack. So we might consider removing Zagnal for cards like the third copy of Kobold Yin, the third copy of Atomos, or maybe Benga Thief, the Opus 4 Earth monster that becomes a 7k Brave forward for 1 Earth. Those are some particularly synergistic monsters that might fit well in the deck. And just in general, Atomos is just a great card in these type of strategies as it is. Typhon, on the other hand, is, despite the fact that he might be a forward when you play Shantoto or Veil 4, he's just a really good removal card, and it's really hard to take him out of the deck. So we think that it's a good idea to keep Typhon in the deck.
あとはコンセプト自体が強いというかしっかりしたデッキなので、よりそこをしっかり実現できるようにするという観点で、召喚獣のヘカトンケイルを入れてもいいのかなと。
全体で今日は相性いいからね。
Yeah, so one other potential point is when you have a deck whose concept is so well fleshed out that this one is, this is a very potent strategy. It's not one that necessarily every deck has a way to fight against. It might be better to take a deck building approach that is focused on doing the one thing that your deck is good at doing really, really well. And so from that perspective, it might be good to add some copies of Hecaton Chair, just so that all of your AoE isn't focused in the cards like Veil 4 and Shantoto and the Titan Lord of Crags. It just has a lot of synergy with this kind of strategy and is a little bit cheaper than the Titan Lord of Crags. And it's just a great removal option. It's also good against a lot of the decks in the meta currently. And we think it'd be a good addition to the deck.
あとはオーパス16でモンスターを強化する非常に強力なミラが登場しているので、ミラも入れてもいいと思います。デッキにすごく合っているカードだと思います。
そうだね。モンスターのコストも軽いし重いから。
Yeah, so another addition from Opus 16 that isn't in the deck is Mira. And this is just a really, really great normal addition to basically every deck that's using monsters. It's high value, it has a lot of synergy, it's reusable, it's even better than Larketius and Citra. It's more efficient than Larketius and Citra. And you should probably play at least a couple of copies, we think.
バックアップかな。結構全体的にバックアップが重い構成になってるんで、ちょっと軽い、星の巫女とかそうちょっと減らすとか、シャドウと少し枚数減らしてもいいかなと思う。あとアルテアもとりあえずノルシャリンからさじきるんで3枚はちょっと過剰かなと思います。
Yeah, so in terms of the backup lineup, one of the problems that we felt that this deck might have is that a lot of the backups are focused into a very few names, and a lot of the backups that we are running a lot of copies of maybe a little bit outdated. Semilafina and Star Sybil were very popular choices for this deck back in the day when it was really popular in, like Opus 5, Opus 6, but are a lot less popular nowadays just because they aren't necessarily on par with a lot of the other options that we have right now. And if you do choose to use them, it might be better to accept them at face value. And another card that you might consider running fewer of is the Althea. Althea is kind of a heavy backup. It's 3 CP upfront. And while it does buy you back 1, it's not a very good backup to start on, and you can also search it with Northshallen. So there's probably not a need to play 3. You might consider at most 2, we think, but probably 1 is just fine, especially if you're mostly using it to bounce Shantotto back to your hand.
あとは星の巫女を減らすことによって、リルムが出にくくなったりとか、あとフィーナもそこまでデッキに合っているカードではないので、この辺りをカットして先ほど言ったようなモンスターとかですね、召喚、ヘカトン経路を入れるような枠を作るのがいいのかなと思います。
リズムは無理に使わなくてもいいっていう感じですね。
そうですね。
Yeah, so because you're taking out, well, potentially if we were taking out a Star Sibyl and Simulafina, it would be pretty difficult to actually play the realm to the field. So if you don't have any extra ways, like a Tyro or something, to play the realm to the field, you might consider dropping realm entirely. While realm is a really powerful card for the monster strategies, it's very important that you're able to play the realm consistently. And if the deck can't play the realm consistently, it might just be better to use the slots that you're using on realm for those extra monsters that we were talking about earlier. In addition, not just the realm, but the Fina that's in the deck is not particularly synergistic with anything that we're doing. While it is just a generically fine card to play, it doesn't really have any synergy with AoE because most of our AoE ignores power and damage entirely. And because of that, you might consider dropping the Realm and the Fina in addition to the Star Sibyl drops.
リルムについては出してこれるのがコボルト号型とか、アトモスとかになってしまうので、その出た時にそのボードに対するインパクトがあまりないっていうところも、ちょっと厳しい点かなと思います。
Another reason you might consider dropping the realm entirely is just because the forwards that or the monsters that you'll be searching and playing to the board with realm are cards like Cold Radiant and Atomos, which while they are powerful attackers, they don't have any direct impact on the board. And because they don't have any direct impact on the board, Realm loses a lot of her potency as a tempo swing. And because of that, she's probably not as strong in the deck as you might think on first glance.
So we have a comment. Fina is there for Zag.
Yeah. So Fina is there to help enable Zagnal, yes. Yeah. But it doesn't, the point about Fina is that it doesn't really synergize with the strategy of bouncing your opponent's forwards to the hand and then attacking them. It's just there to turn the Zagnal into a forward.
他に入れた方がいいモンスターとかですかね。
バックアップは抜くのは言ったんですけど、何を入れるのかは言ってないですね。
何を入れるか。アンバーレキソですか。
Yeah, so in terms of potential substitutes for backups, Kurosawa is the one who said it. He said you might consider playing Amber just because you already have Northshallen, and having consistent backups is oftentimes better than having the high-value technical backups. So because of that, you might consider playing Amber and Lexan here simply as a back surge, and a little bit of extra EX burst for the deck too, which is nice.
あとはなんだろう。テテオとかもなんかその無限コンボしなくてもそのキャラクターのコストをプレイをたくさんするできながら、全体的にやっぱそのコストが軽くなって強いと思うから採用してもいいかなと思う。
Yeah, and Kakka brings up a great point that even if you're not doing any infinite combo, any loops, you might consider playing Tilaka, just because this is a deck that is playing a lot of characters to the board, and because of that, Tilaka is generally going to give you a lot of value over time as you play. It's also very synergistic with Atomos, and it works with the Zidanes and the Citra as well. Should probably drop Zagnal for Puma. Yeah, yeah. Dropping the Zagnal for a card like Luminous Puma, which gives you extra recursion.
With
and
Mira.
With Mira, and especially synergistic with Mira, Larkishas, and Citra, is a potentially a good idea.
他に入れたいモンスターがあれば。
プーマはもちろん入るんですけど、あとはなんだろうな。 まあ1コスそうでもそうか1コスとゲームの入れは特に入れる必要はないからあと入れたいのは
なんかあったっけ？
そんなもんかな。
Yeah, we were trying to think of other potential monsters to add to the deck, but that's probably about it in terms of monsters that actually fit into Earth Wind. Yes, an extra backup to add. That's a great point. Fiona could be a good backup to add, particularly synergistic with this kind of deck. In that regards, one of my favorite cards, actually, you might consider adding is Layak. Layak is a card that synergizes really, really well with Fiona and is also just generally good with these kinds of strategies.
レアクとかズーとかね。
とか Zoo ね。
うん
令和のレアクね。あれ。Yeah. So Zoo would also be a potential card. Although if you put Zoo in the deck, you're kind of stepping into loop territory. So yeah. あとはまとめるような。
そうですね、やっぱりそのしっかりコンセプトを実現できるようにっていうことをやっぱり一番大事にしてデッキを調整されるのがいいというふうに思います。はい、コンボデッキみたいなもんなので。
Yeah. So Kurosawa's advice for well, this list, but also just everything in general, is just make sure that your deck, when you build these kinds of decks, is to make sure that your deck is doing the one thing that it was conceptualized to do as well as it possibly can. I think that's great advice. Earthwind monster list make me miss Dodaluma. じゃあ最後のデッキに行きましょうか。
時間的には
時間大丈夫ですか？
We have one more
5分
deck.
ほど。
はい。
Yeah, so we're gonna go for one more deck. It looks like we have time for a third deck today.
Deck name Ninjas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
わかりやすい。Yeah, so this is Ninjas by one Kyle Peters. This is a deck that is totally, it's a Firewind iteration of the Ninja deck, and it's made possible by Edge. Edge is the key card for these kinds of strategies. He's going to let you play all of your ninjas regardless of color, and he'll reduce all of their cost by 1. So that makes cards like Mina and all of your 2 CP standard unit ninjas 1 CP. And those are much more powerful when they cost 1 less. You know, this cost reduction is incredibly powerful.
ここはぜひ閣下から何か。
俺そうだね、まあ、全体的に結構まとまってるんだけど、まあなんか難しいなっていうかな
そうですね、まずそう完成度が高いのでそんなに言うことないっていうのが一つある。
まあちょっと、まあ、そうだね、なんか、まあ、若干 PR でとしてはやっぱそのなんか全体的にオリオンナイトとかちょっとなんかちょっと全体的にちょっと浮いてる感があるから、まあ、そこら辺はなんか別のカードでもいいかなって思うのと、まあ、あとあれだね、そのビスマルクとやっぱその、まあ、相性良くてなんかチポンとかもうちょい増やしたいかなっていう印象がまあ
そういうのは時短とかも、まあ2枚とか入れてもいいのかなっていうところはありますね。Yeah, so first things first, the deck is just generally it seems very well crafted. There's not a whole lot compared to other lists that we looked at up until this point. We don't have as much to say about it. One of the things that we do see here though is that it's not particularly clear what the Onion Knight is being used for, and while it is generally just a good card by itself, it's not necessarily true that we have like an idea of what we really want to be doing with the Onion Knight, and in that regard, we might consider trimming some of the Onion Knights or changing them to other potentially more useful cards if there's anything better that we could put in its place. The other thing that stood out to us is that we have Bismarck, and while Bismarck is just a very generally good value card, and you have a lot of win forwards in the deck to be using his action ability with, there's not actually a whole lot of cards that we want to be bouncing besides Tsukinoa and Typhon. And in that regard, we might consider playing some extra copies of Typhon, or we might consider a couple of copies of 3CP Zidane if we could find the slots for those, as those are, you know, one card combos, or just really generally powerful cards that you really want to play over and over again with Bismarck, that can kind of do unfair things to the opponent, make them unable to play the game. And those would be some of the cards that would be looking to play more aggressively.
オニオンナイト入ってる段階で、火のカードが確か21枚だって抜いて、まあ、風のカードを入れたとして、まあ、18枚とかですね、火が18枚とかになったとしても、このデッキはエッジがあって、それで、属性のサポートができるので、あまりそこまで気にしすぎなくても大丈夫だと思います。
So another potential aspect of playing the Onion Knight was that when you have the 3 Onion Knight in the deck, it comes to 21 fire, if I'm not mistaken. And while 21 is a pretty good number for a normal 2-color deck for whatever your secondary color is, because you have Edge, and Edge kind of allows you to ignore a lot of those restrictions, it might not actually be necessary to play so many fire cards to support the Ninja package. Because if you have Edge, then you won't have to think about colors almost at all, basically.
あとはコメントでスコールハテナっていうのが来てるんですけど、多分そう。
そうね、ダメージ当てるカードだから全体的にそのなんだろう、まあ、エッジのその手裏剣というか、エッジのカウンターと相性が良かったりとかするんだろうなって、まあ、ビスマルク、ビュリーフィールドとかも一緒ですね。なんかそういった細かいダメージを与えるカードとエッジが相性がいいから多分採用されてるのかなと思います。
Yeah, so there's a comment in the chat asking about Squall in deck, and we actually really like the idea of Squall in the deck, maybe especially now that Mashri is not in the picture. But yeah, with Squall in the deck, dealing 4,000 damage wide is actually quite useful in this kind of deck, just because you have cards like Bismarck and Edge and Brynhilder that kind of deal a lot of smaller pings, somewhere between 2 and 5,000, and having Squall to enable those against multiple targets every turn, and also is a really difficult threat to block, is particularly important for this kind of strategy. And we actually think this is probably one of the decks that Squall really does shine in.
あとは除去が結構ダメージによっているので、その空茶スペルを少しだけ入れておくと対応力が上がるかなと思いました。
Yeah, a lot of our damage is kind of centered, or a lot of our removal is centered around dealing damage, you know, with cards like Edge and Squall, like we were talking about just now. And because of that, we might consider adding, well, maybe at least, you know, 1 or potentially 2 copies of Ku Chaspel to the deck, as it's a card that kind of ensures that we are allowed to do that as a hedge against, you know, strategies or damage reduction strategies. There's some puns in the chat. I think Onion Knight is perfectly okay in this list. Yes, yes. I think personally, if this was my deck, I might be tempted to run a couple of copies of the 2CP Chocobo. It's just because the deck is so centered around Edge, it is important that you always have access to and can protect Edge, and having some copies of Chocobo could be good ways of protecting Edge when he's going to be removed by, you know, like a Braska or something like that.
Agree.
They agreed with me. Well, this one was a little bit shorter, but maybe we should move on to the preview cards.
Okay.
そろそろプレビューカードまで。はい。あ、了解です。完成度が高いから言うことはもうそんなに。All right, we're getting the preview cards ready for you guys. I'd maybe like 1 Phoenix to revive the Edge. I think if I was going to play a card to get back Edge from the break zone, I would want to play Asura instead. It's just generally a very useful summon to have. Phoenix is kind of prone to Mist Dragon and White Mage and cards like that, but Asura costing 1 is a lot better against those cards. Thanks for the deck reviews. I love your thoughts and feedback. Thanks for watching. We love doing this.
Okay.
All right, we're having some technical difficulties. Hang with us.
So Kurosawa reviewed all the decks that were submitted.
Yep.
Yeah, it was all on a list. He had all the advices, but we only had time for
Yeah, we only had time for everything.
but he checked all of them.
Yeah.
いきますか? Okay. We have fixed the technical difficulties and we're ready for the preview cards.
Ooh.
So let's get started.
Okay. So, the first card is Man in Black.
So, no spoilers. This is a card that you cannot play when you already have a card named Golbez.
Wonder why.
No spoilers. So it's a 5 CP. This is the second Man in Black that we've had. 5 CP Lightning Forward, 9,000. And when he enters the field, you choose a summon in your break zone. You're removed from the game, and you can play it whenever you want. No strings attached. You do have to pay the cost because you're casting it. And when you cast a summon, you choose a forward, and it gains. This card cannot attack or block until the end of the turn.
まず、まあ最初見た時の印象はなんかでかいクルルっていうあれですよね。
一応なんかそのまあ雷だからそのコスノオーディンとかと相性がめちゃくちゃ良くて、そのまああれはそのオーディン自体がやっぱ軽く打ってて、まあ召喚獣がたくさん入るけど、そういう方と組み合わせると強いかなと思いますね。
Yeah, so Kurosawa's first thought when he saw the card was that it's a really, really big krill. And yeah, I mostly agree. Kakka's thought on it was that if you are playing a card, because it's lightning, if you're playing a deck that doesn't have a lot of summon recursion, which lightning doesn't really have a way to recur any summons, this might be a good way to get extra value out of, you know, the 6-drop Odin in those Odin-based decks that want to cast the 6-drop Odin for as cheap and as much as possible. This might be a potential good way to get to double dip on the value on the 6-drop Odin and decks like that.
あとはこの人はゴルベーザが嫌いなんですかっていう。なんか関係があるんですかね。
Yeah, so we have a great comment in the chat. Weird, does this guy just hate Golbez or what? And yeah, I don't know. What's his deal? What's his deal? We don't know. His job is question mark, question mark, question mark. I have no idea. Okay, maybe we should go to the next card.
Oh, we have a full
That's
art.
right, yeah. And this is a
wow.
full art, yeah. So this is Kakioroshi? So this is original art. Oh. From one Mr. Akira Ogura, and yeah, it looks good.
すごいめっちゃかっこいいその美術館とかに飾ってありそうな感じの絵ですね。
Yeah, it does kind of look like it would be in a museum, is what Kurosawa had to say about this.
ジョブがなくて作れないそうでなんかハテの方と違う。
そう。英語版だとハテナが3つで、日本語版だと4つ。Yeah, maybe it'll come up at FFTCG trivia one day. Just like how many question marks does the Man in Black's job
or it's
have?
an errata.
Yeah, or errata. Fix the job. じゃあ次行きましょうか。So this is the second preview that we have for today. It's a light FFBE forward. Huh? So this is Engelbert from War of the Visions, and when he enters the field, you gain 2 crystals. And then when you pay a crystal, you can choose a forward, and it gets the Minwu text. If this forward would deal damage by your opponent's abilities, the damage becomes 0 instead until the end of the turn.
今週紹介されたその水のレジェンドとすごい相性がいいカードで、 まあ、こいついったそのクリスタルを使ってサビって言ってるんですけど、こいつが出るとこのクリスタルを2個入れるんで、まあ、それで2個も使える。あと単純にまあ、今まで使いづらかったクライミングクイーンの重いクリスタルコストもなんか使いやすくなるかなというカードですね。
Yep. So Kakka brings up some great points about the card. Basically, we had Glaciella revealed as card of the week a couple of days ago, and this is a card with great synergy with Glaciella. So Glaciella, for those who don't know, she lets you pay with your S abilities with crystals, and then she gets a crystal, and her S ability is that you can pay with a crystal is 1 water and 1 normal. This lets you deal damage to a forward equal to the number of characters that you have times 2,000. And because this gives you 2 crystals, that basically lets you fire off the S ability 3 times. In addition, it was just hard to get crystals in some decks, and this is a card that just guarantees that you're able to get crystals in basically any deck that needs it. So it seems good.
We have a good comment. This seems a bit more fair than the other FFB like.
Yes.
そうあとはそう光属性でどんなデッキにも入るっていうところもすごい良くてですね、セーラーメビウスとかクリスタルを得るために何かをするカードをコンセプトにした時ってある程度まとまった枚数を入れたいんですけど、そうすると結構属性を増やすのかどうなのかというような壁にぶち当たることがあって、そういうところもこういう使いやすいクリスタルをしかも2個もくれるカードが出ると、またちょっとコンセプトとして締まるのかなというふうに思います。
まあ、こいつもクリスタルで使えるしね。
Yeah, so another big part that Kurosawa was thinking about for crystals is that basically, no matter what deck, what elements you're playing, when you play cards that use crystals, basically you have to play a lot of cards that are good at getting crystals. And because this is a light or dark card, being able to play that in any shell, in any strategy, no matter what other elements you're playing, is pretty big for deck building with crystals. One of the key parts about getting crystals was that you generally had to play a 2-color deck, because the only deck that could get a lot of crystals by itself was maybe Mono Water, because it has Gao and some other crystal gaining cards. But it was very difficult to do so before. So now this opens a lot of potential for potentially monocolor crystal decks. In addition, it works really well with Sarah Mobius, because she has the text, whenever you get a crystal, do X. Potentially, if there are other cards in the set that say, like, whenever you get a crystal, do X, this card could be really good for those kinds of strategies. Personally, I'm really excited to use it in Mono Earth, because in Mono Earth, the only way to get crystals was with Geomancer, the backup, and that made it impossible to play Robel Akbel in Mono Earth. But with this card, it's a lot more feasible. And also, he uses crystals himself, so you're never gonna just not be able to use your crystals or have any out.
まあそうだね。まあレナは
から出せない
から
出せないけど、まあとりあえずレナはクリスタルやっぱ使い先としてはやっぱ優秀だからってことで。
出せたらぶっ壊れてましたねって。
レナーから出せなくてよかったっていうコメント。Yeah, so good point in the chat about not being able to play him off of Lena because he would get you 2 crystals back. Yeah. On the other hand, he is really good for decks that use Lena because he just gives you those crystals immediately. Just in general, a very solid light or dark card, I think, here.
やっぱりこういう背景の光のカードは実績があるので次のセットのクリスタルデッキにはかなり期待してます。
Kurosawa points out that this is the background for another very, very powerful light FFV card, and that card put up a lot of tournament results. So this Engelbert's got a lot to live up to. Big shoes to fill.
闇も公開されてないけど、そうか強いんだろう。
Maybe the dark card that corresponds to Engelbert will be able to live up to the legend of his predecessor as well.
I hope they survive.
じゃあ最後行きましょうか。Alright, and here's the ice legend that we have for you today. So this is another Dawn Warrior Zezat. Mobius, and 5. And the cost required to cast Zeza is increased by 1 for each card in your opponent's hand. So this is the same as the lightning that we had a few sets ago. And when Zeza enters the field, if your opponent has 3 or more cards in their hand, your opponent reveals their hand, you select 1 card from it, and that's not a backup, and your opponent has to discard this card. So it's like Zidane, kind of, or like Kate Sith. Kurosawa pointed that out earlier. And yeah, and when he attacks, all 4 you control gain 1,000 power until the end of turn, which is a nice bonus.
そうです。まず3枚の時に出せたとすると合計4コスト払ってカード1枚ディスカードさせられるので、まあ、実質2コスト相当ぐらいで9000でアタックした1万っていうのも一言で言えますね。強い
Very strong.
Yeah, so first of all, just doing some very basic math. If your opponent has 3 cards in their hand when you play it, then it's a 4 CP 9k, but then it discards your opponent a card, so it buys you 1 back, so it's kind of a 2 CP 9k. Or if your opponent has 1 card in their hand, then it's actually just a 2 CP 9k. And then when he attacks, he swings at 10k and busts your entire board. It's just really good. Like that's just yeah, really good text, really good circumstances for the card.
あとはコストが相手依存なところはあるんですけど、まあ、4枚ぐらいでも、ね、3コスト相当で9000なので強いですし、こう使えるゲームの中のレンジが広いっていうのも、まあ、すごくいいところだと思います。
Yeah, so a lot of these cards, they generally get, like Lightning, for example, is very, very expensive to play at, like, say, 5 CP or 4 CP because it's just a 4 CP 9k. But Zeza, on the other hand, because if your opponent has a lot of cards in your hand, you get the discard ability, it's actually not that bad to play him at 5 CP. At that point, because he's getting 2 back, he's like a 3 CP 9k. And so the range that Zeza is available to be casted at for a profit is actually really, really good.
あとはそうだね、なんかそのこいつ結局1コスだから、そのなんか踏み倒す手段、例えばその水晶湖とか、あとレナとか、踏み出す手段と一緒に使うと、まあ、強いカードだよねっていう。
Yeah, in addition to just casting him at his normal restricted cost, whatever that may be, you can also cheat him in with abilities like that of the Crystal Exarch or like Lena that gets back a cost or less from your break zone. These kinds of cards that help you cheating cards from your hand or break zone to the field are really, really easy to use with Zezat because he costs 1. And yeah, it just has great synergy with those kinds of effects in general. Personally, I'm excited. I think he's just good to play with Alcid. Like, he's a 1 cost, so you wouldn't think to, but you can just play him off of Alcid, and he's a 4 CP 9k. You'll get 2 freezes. You're going to be able to attack really, really easily over the next few turns, and you'll generally get the discard effects pretty reliably if you're playing him off of Alcid at any given board state. In addition, because he's a 1 CP, in Icewind, you can add him back with Asura. And in Earth, you can add him back with Zombie, the monster that adds back 2 CPs. And I love Zombie. I love the monsters. So that's a card I'm excited to use this with as well.
Oh, Batsか。
Sokka. Yeah, somebody mentioned and something that slipped all over minds. Yeah, he also comes in off of Opus 12 Barts. Yeah. So you can get discard off of Barts, and you can search him with Sildra too. So yes, so you can Sildra to search for Lena and Zezat, and then discard the Zezat to play Lena, and then get the Zezat back with Lena.
5は悪さをする。
Yeah, 5 is a pretty good category to have in this game because of Sildra.
あとは飛行機とかだとどうですか？
セルティオスから出るしね。
セルティオスからも出るし、ニコストの、光の戦士でクリスタル払って出せるやつとかも出るし、踏み出すやつは、ソウルとか、踏み出し手段もたくさんあるから。
Yeah, in addition to the others that we mentioned before, like the Crystal Exarch, in Fire Ice in particular, he can come in off of Soul or off of Celsius. Also, he's just fine to normally cast, but particularly off of Soul and Celsius, he could be quite powerful. Yeah, he comes in off of Phoenix too. Good point.
Playable off Kelgar,
うん
the Dawn Warrior
Ah.
Tribal.
そうね、あとキルがいるから、また他のなんかガラフとか、ドルゴみたいなの多分出るかもしれないし。
Yeah, so given that we've already seen the new Kelgar legend as well, and now that we see Zazat, we can probably assume that Dorgan and Galoof are coming. So maybe we have some more legends to look forward to with Emissaries.
Maybe we get to see them in different elements, right? So
Yeah, so Kelgar is wind this time, so maybe we'll see Dorgan in a new element besides because Kelgar is a legend and Noel is the other wind legend. So maybe Dorgan will be a different element besides wind this time. Oh yeah, and we have a full art for this one as well. What did they name?
ない。
Oh, we don't have a full art for
We
this
don't.
one. Sorry, we don't have a full art for this one. That's my bad. Okay.
there might be one, but
There
we don't
could
have
be
it
one.
today.
I'm actually a little confused now about which it is. Dawn Warrior is coming in hard. Playable off Kelgar action. Say Fire Dorgan. Fire Dorgan. Maybe. Yeah, maybe Fire Dorgan.
Fire Golf, maybe.
Fire Galoof, maybe. Yeah, that could be a thing too. It's true. Lightning Dorgan, maybe. That one seems less likely to me. I think Lightning's a Kelgar kind of thing. More mystery footballers. Okay, so I think that mostly wraps up the previews. I hope you guys enjoyed those cards. あとなんかまとめるような感想などありましたら
ありますか？
ありますか？
そうですね、今日は初めてデッキを見るデッキ診断みたいな企画をやりましたけども、楽しんでいただけたらいいなと思います。あんまり我々もやる機会がないのでそう参考になることを言えてたらいいなと思うんですけど、はい
そうね、禁止用の話とかも全然その一応全然プレイヤー自体は禁止用の話しないから、まあ、ちょっと自信ないけど参考にしてる。
Yeah, so just some closing thoughts from Kurosawa and Kakka. Kurosawa said that there's not a lot of opportunity actually to do these kinds of, deck doctors on any semi-official platforms or anything like that. It's kind of more of a something that, players do on their own stream or, something like that. So it was fun to have this opportunity to do this on at this event or at this particular stream. And we're really grateful that you guys provided a great deck list for us and stuck with us while we did that. Kakka had a lot of fun with the ban list talk too, and while that's something that everybody talks about that kind of stuff, there's not usually a lot of opportunity to talk about that in any official channels or semi-official channels, and because of that, it was a lot of fun and we had a great time. We hope that you also had a great time with the content of the show today, and that you enjoyed the stuff that we had to say. It's not every day that we get to have a platform like this for talking to other players and having an outlet for players in Japan to present their thoughts to players abroad. So thank you for sticking with us today. And any other closing thoughts, Kabukin? Anything?
Oh, well, can't wait for the new set. Yeah.
Yeah,
New set.
There's the Golbez versus Cecil deck coming out in a week. A week?
Right, in a week.
Next week.
Yeah. Golbez versus Cecil coming out in a week. Look forward to that. We're all looking forward to playing with the new set as well. We wish everybody good luck at their upcoming events. We know it's been a really long time since there's been any official events to go to in North America and overseas in general, and you guys are having a lot of fun with that. We hope that you have a lot of fun. We're very excited to see what comes from the overseas meta with Mashri's ban being in effect, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
have a great day. We'll see you next time. Not sure if and when there's going to be a next stream.
There
but
will be.
There will be. There
we
will
promise
be.
you.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure when there's going to be a next stream. But we look forward to doing more of these kinds of streams and more feature match kind of streams in the future. So thank you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, fellas. See you around.
Yep. More streams, more kakka.
Thank you.
More kakka.